Sean David Morton has been researching and investigating UFOs and exopolitics since the 1960s. His family is associated with the TRW Aerospace Company, where his father worked, and he was introduced to some of the leading astronauts, scientists, and inventors associated with some of the most classified technologies that have been secretly explored and reverse engineered. He has been on numerous shows. He has helped found some really major television shows such as the Sci-Fi Channel, and he has been on Ancient Aliens, Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, and he was there at the very beginning when the videos of aliens, gray aliens, that were being interrogated, interviewed, or even autopsied were first released, and he was part of the investigations to determine the veracity of these. More recently, he's written a 9-volume, or he's working on a 9-volume series called Sands of Time. He's just released volume 8, and he's going to be finishing volume 9 very shortly. And he is here today on Exopolitics Today to talk about his research on these alien videos and also what lies ahead for the rest of 2023.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Sean, back to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Salla, Mr. Salla, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. You really are a legend. You've been at this for a long time, and thank you. It's an honor to be on with you. It's above ground and alive, actually, but thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad to have you here with us, Sean, because I know you go back many, many decades before I got involved in this field. And, what I found is that experience is important. There's a lot of new people coming along and trying to kind of establish their niche in this field. But I like to work with the old timers because they were there at the beginning. They know all the nuances of these historical cases, and you're a legend yourself, and you were there at the beginning. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got involved? And I was intrigued by your association with TRW through your father.
My original interest, my parents are very interesting. My dad was an ace fighter pilot in Korea and a test pilot, and my mother was, a supermodel and actually ran for vice president of the United States before on the Populist Party American Independent ticket. She was also the director of the National Health Federation for like 37 years. And we were responsible for taking on the federal government and getting everything from acupuncture, chiropractics, chelation therapy, alternative cancer therapies. As a matter of fact, we had a huge win under the Trump administration when Trump actually signed the right to try legislation. That's something that the NHF had been championing forever. Matter of fact, all of your New Age expos now are really due to the fact that my mother didn't want, because of her religious convictions, I guess, she didn't want the woo-woo New Age stuff in the National Health Federation expos, which is why they branched off and started the Whole Life expos up in Northern California, Berkeley, San Francisco, San Jose. So the entire expo circuit, which of course has now led to things on the internet, and is all my family was kind of behind it. So but because my dad was the vice president of customer relations and public relations for TRW, I grew up with the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts. I have two godfathers who walked on the moon, and it was actually General James McDivitt, who was one of the first guys who the astronauts would go up, and they were allowed a pocket inside their spacesuits, and of course they fought these German engineers window so that they could actually see out of the capsule. And, the German engineers didn't want to let them do that, probably because when you looked out the window, each one of these missions was being followed by UFOs. And they had these wind-up Bell and Howell 8mm cameras, and they would take these snippets of footage out the window of them being followed by these things. And the only reason I mentioned General James McDivitt is because he was one of the people that had a whole stack of, I guess you could say, a library of these videos. And they would come over to the house. We lived in Rolling Hills at the time, which you can see is now falling down the hill. It's all, it's up on the national news now. And we'd put a sheet up on the wall and thread them through the old time movie camera. And we'd look at UFO videos. Now, it's interesting because Gus Grissom was probably the biggest one that, would just kind of grunt and say, well, we're just spamming a can. He says, you realize that that's the real stuff. I mean, those are the German texts, and that's the alien stuff and whatever else that they're all testing down at, they used to call it, back in the 60s, they called it the Docktown Strip. And today you know of it as Groom Lake, Area 51, or 5-1, as it's called, kind of on the inside. And I think, and it was kind of an interesting thing because Gus and Don Isley were inseparable, and they were both supposed to go on Apollo 1. And Don was out swimming on our pool, and he put me up on his shoulders, and he slipped on the diving board, and I fell on his shoulder and dislocated his shoulder, which made him medically ineligible for Apollo 1, which is what saved his life, because Apollo 1 on January 26th of 1967, a wire caught fire after being told that the capsule was a piece of junk, basically, and the 3 astronauts in a launch test all burned to death, and which was a horrible thing. And so anyway, so my knowing all these astronauts and all these people who were involved in the in the moon landing, and we did land on the moon. The the naysayers are talking about it because that we didn't land on the moon, primarily because there was publicity shots and a lot of things that were being done in case something went wrong and guys died. And it's also interesting too that the hangars on 33rd and Apollo across the street from TRW, all part of the big TRW complex, later was actually turned into Marvel Studios or Raleigh Studios, where they shot Captain America, they shot Iron Man. I was involved with things like Ally McBeal and the TV shows there, but the big hangars where they built the Saturn V rockets and the lunar modules that I would go see when I was a kid were turned into Marvel Studios, which was eventually bought by Disney, of course, and moved up to Burbank. But
I have a question about TRW and the moon landing, which this is from William Tompkins. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he worked at TRW from 1967 to 1971. And he says during the Apollo moon landing, he was there at the TRW facility. Right. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Los Angeles or at there at the Kennedy Space Center. But he says that there was live camera feed that showed the landing, and it showed that there were these huge extraterrestrial spacecraft parked on the crater where the Eagle had landed. So
that's correct.
Did you ever hear of that?
Yes. Not only that, but they talked about this was Buzz and Neil. I went to USC. Buzz went to the USC. Or, I'm sorry, Neil went to USC, and so we were kind of like Trojans fight on kind of deal. But no, when they got out, there were guys in specifically there were 3 men in gold spacesuits that were standing on the edge of the Tranquility crater, and they just kind of shrugged and said, "Well, there goes the neighborhood," and turned around and walked away. So that's what I heard about it at the time. And they had a secondary frequency or channel, a B frequency that they called the medical frequency. So if they had a problem, it's like, oh, I took a crap in my suit, or the urine is getting up in my nose and whatever. They would switch over to these medical channels, which were a totally classified channel, which I think went through Pine Gap, Australia. And to talk about, they had code names for them. They called them Santa Claus and Barbara, I think. They would say, well, we're going over Barbara, or Santa Claus is with us, and that would be the ships that were following us up there. Now, again, talking about exopolitics, we really landed on the moon. When I talk about we, using a combination of alien and German technology, in January of 1953, which was the National Security Agency, which was the NSA, along with the whole MJ-12 group, And that is what then precipitated the meeting, the rather hostile meeting, I might add, with when they kidnapped Eisenhower for the day when he was out playing golf in Palm Springs. And they shipped him over to the Muroc Air Force Base, which is now Edwards, and basically had this, take us to your leader, and threatened Eisenhower with, a couple of things. One, you're not really allowed off this planet or outside the orbit of the moon because you're isolated here. This then I wrote a book about this called the Isomer Protocol, which is what it was called. The Isomer Protocol was a series of treaties that was called the Isolation Memorandum, about that we were not really allowed off this planet because our language, our attitudes, our even thought process is considered to various extraterrestrials a disease, a virus. And so, they had put a fence up around this area of space quite some time ago. And this was back in the days of Enoch, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair and started to boof the human earth girls in direct violation of their prime directive. So whoever Yahweh was at the time, or God, said, fine, you like it here so much, you get to stay. And I'm going to put a big fence around this place so you can't get out and your buddies can't get in. And we started blowing holes in this fence with all the atomic stuff, atomic and hydrogen and cobalt and whatever else we started testing in 1945. And by the way, the whole Oppenheimer movie is another Christopher Nolan propaganda deal, because we had dismally failed with the Manhattan Project. And it wasn't until we actually brought German scientists under Project Paperclip to the United States, and they had built apparently a basket of pineapple-sized nuclear bombs, which they presented to Hitler. And for whatever reason, Hitler didn't use them, didn't put them on the tips of the V2, didn't do whatever. But that was when at Peenemünde, we divided the German scientists between the United States with Wernher von Braun, and the other half went to Russia. But there was a whole third part of these that I wrote my book, Real Diamond Diaries, about 1,700 of these scientists who disappeared. And Real Diamond Diaries and Wilhelm Schulman of the Schulman Resonance of the Earth actually testified that the Vril Diamond, these 5 beautiful long-haired women, had actually managed to channel extraterrestrials and build a spacecraft that was called Rumflugen, or spaceflight, that allowed about 1,700 of them, Schulman and Himmler, waiting in line, and the last ship did not come back. So they fled, and they wound up in the hands of the United States.
Okay. Well, so Sean, with the Eisenhower meetings with the extraterrestrials and the Germans, one of the things that I found out in my research, and I'd like to get your take on this, is that in 1954, Eisenhower is taken to Muroc, or Edwards Air Force Base, where he meets with this group of friendly-looking Nordic extraterrestrials that tell him about the dangers of nuclear weapons and try and get the US to end the thermonuclear weapons campaign. And then in 1955, a year later, at Holloman Air Force Base, Eisenhower meets with the Grey German Alliance. And so that's when the agreements were reached. Yes, and there's debate over whether Eisenhower was part of that, or whether he was kind of like betrayed by MJ-12. So what do you know about those agreements and those meetings in 54, 55?
Okay, so our original moon landing, as I said, using a combination of alien tech that we got from Roswell, and again, there were 3 ships at Roswell. One exploded over Mac Brazel's ranch. The other one had a big hole in it, fluttered down, and came down outside of Corona. If you read all of Lieutenant Corso's, Colonel Corso's, Lieutenant Colonel Corso's books and information, the third craft apparently hit a panic button and traveled 10 years through time. And Corso actually met with the third ship and met with the being there, and allowed him to fix his ship and fly away. The only survivor of the Roswell crash was kind of a robot, really. It was like an avatar. It was a female named Ariel. And there was a woman by the name of Matilda McElroy, an awesome book actually written called the Alien Interview. and she was the assistant secretary of General Nathan Twining. Now, weirdly enough, I went to USC with Jamie Twining, his grandson, and we got invited over to the Twining house for Thanksgiving and Easter break and whatever else. And General Twining would say, "Well, who's going to believe you kids?" and would tell us all about it. But the alien being would only speak to this woman, to the secretary, and gave her tons of information about that. Basically, Earth is that the cosmos is a business, really, and that Earth has been biotechnically engineered, and it's like these beings go to expos, if you will, and they find bioengineering stuff. It's like, oh, I like bees. I'm going to put them on my planet. It was February 53 that he was taken out to Murdoch when he disappeared for the 24-hour period. And then I'm not sure what happened in 55, but we signed a final treaty, which was called the Sigma Treaty. And that was with the Greys in 64. Now, the things that the tall whites warned us about, and by the way, this comes from the eyewitness testimony of the Archbishop of Los Angeles, of Gerald Light, of a whole number of people. They never told us who they were. They were just these very tall, thin white beings. We called them the Etherians because they had a device on their belt that they could actually switch a dial and it would bend light, allow them to appear and disappear. And of course, they demonstrated the craft, which completely broke the laws of physics, made a lot of the scientists throw up because they had no idea how they worked. And we were told, stop it with the nuclear weapons because you're opening giant holes on the time-space continuum, and there's a bunch of bad stuff out there, really negative things that are coming through. That's number one. Number two, you don't get to go any further than the moon, which was the Isomer Protocol, which we broke in 2006 when we basically kicked the Alliance in the teeth and said, well, screw you, we're going to do what we want. And it warned us. They warned us that we were going to be contacted by the Greys. And they weren't so nice. And that they were going to pretend to be all nice and cuddly and whatever. And we did get contacted by the Greys in November, I think, of that time. And the Greys and Eisenhower thought, well, if these guys were afraid of atomic weapons, then I want them. And as far as the Greys went, when they came back, they said, well, look, we have no problem with you with the atomic weapons. Tell you what, you give us your people to kidnap, and we're at the end of an evolutionary spiral, and so we want to be able to collect sperm and eggs to hybridize and crossbreed them with our race or species, which is what began that way. And we'll give you technology. It was basically like a trade, like trading Manhattan Island for beads and brushes and mirrors. And we then learned, we started building these. We had all these deep underground military bases anyway, and we started sharing the bottom of these bases with these Greys, like Dulce as an example. And it was Reagan. When Reagan came in, he knew all about them. And because we also had what most people don't realize, and it talks all about it in the Sumerian War, which is why Exopolitics is the perfect name for the show, because that's what all my Sands of Time books are about. It's about the black world, shadow politics, 40 years in the shadow government, and the exopolitics of what reality really is, dealings with these various ET races. And so underneath where the Greys are, there are actually pockets of nests of what they call the dark vril reptilians. And these are the ones that basically hunt and eat people and can actually hollow out a human being and sort of take on their persona and their visage and their images. And these are the ones that are in line with the Illuminati and the Council of 12 and the P3 Masons and whatever else. So it's anyway, so the Greys said,
I just wanted to kind of like segue from that into this Victor Alien interview.
Yes.
That he's starting to kind of like get attention again.
Right.
And I mean, just for the viewers that maybe haven't seen it, what I want to do is just play 2 minutes of a documentary that showed Victor talking about the alien, and this is a grey alien, while it was being interrogated. So let's play that video, and at the end of the video, I'll get you to just kind of like comment about Victor and what you discovered about this alien video. So
Sure.
let's play that video.
Isn't your purpose in releasing this tape to expose Area 51 to the world?
My purpose is to expose the existence of the aliens, not compromise these individuals. I made the decision to come forward. I'm taking precautions to protect my own identity, and I don't think it's fair for me to put these others in danger of exposure. In any case, the interview on the tape went nowhere. It was interrupted, as you'll see.
Can you describe for us what we're seeing?
All right, we're looking at the interview suite at S4. It's kept dark for the comfort of the aliens. The figure who is just barely visible in the left foreground is the telepath, and behind the camera is a raked seating area for observers. Although in this case, I believe the only other person present was a military aide. The alien is seated behind a glass partition in a biocontainment area, which is maintained at biosafety level 2, the lowest designation. That's primarily for the protection of the aliens, not us. The theory is that if they were going to infect us with an alien bug, it would have happened 50 years ago. In fact, all the indications are the aliens eliminated microbial and viral life from their own ecosystem long ago. They aren't susceptible to our diseases directly, but it has been shown that microbes can reproduce and form colonies within their respiratory systems, which tends to exacerbate the debilities they seem to suffer anyway in our environment. In fact, you can see here, the alien is beginning to flag. The interview was not going well. The telepath was trying to clarify some points from a previous interview, but he wasn't receiving coherent responses. As you can see, the being is in real distress. At this point, the telepath is sending out a message to the medical staff. He's trying to communicate with the alien, but he's getting no response. There's very little he can do. There's no direct connection between his space and the biocontainment area. That's the aide stepping in on the right. The medical staff should be there by now. They're slow in responding. There they are. I have to say the medical personnel at S4 are less than first rate. They tend to be selected for their willingness to keep secrets rather than their medical competence. By the way, he's not shining that light into the eyes. It looks that way, but in fact he's checking for hemorrhaging around the eye sockets and in the nasal cavity. I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to watch this.
Okay, Sean, so you want to tell us what you know about Victor and that leaked video of an alien or grey alien being interrogated?
Okay, Victor managed to smuggle this out. It's 2 minutes and 55 seconds of footage that had to do with him being part of the digitalization of a whole bunch of analog footage, where the government, military, whomever, decided that they were going to take all the analog stuff that they have and digitize it for security. But Victor, being one of those people, managed to smuggle out somehow, some way, 2 minutes and 55 seconds of this footage. Now, this goes all the way back, by the way, to my involvement with the alien autopsy. I was working at Unsolved Mysteries at the time. My partner, Bob Keviat, and he and I had worked with each other on a show that Geraldo Rivera had called Now It Can Be Told. So Bob came out from East Coast and was solved. And I found or brought forward Ray Santilli and Volker Spielberg and these guys with the alien autopsy footage. I got snaked by Bob, who basically just kind of pushed me entirely out of the project. He put basically a production company together and did it, just shoved me aside. And so because of the alien autopsy, and there were problems with the alien autopsy, by the way. There's a lot of information that it may have been faked or rigged, or that it was footage from a Canadian science fiction movie, but there are a lot of things that back it up. The film stock was from, the 1940s. The cameraman was very legitimate for a number of reasons. There were things about the alien, the fact that its brain did not have a bicameral fissure, was just one mass, that there was a crystal object in its chest. So this alien is basically a very advanced kind of biological robot. All right, so Fox had aired this, and of course it was a big hit and whatever else. And the reason they did is because Victor had the footage, and he went to Fox and said, I got, 2 minutes, 55 seconds of an alien interview. And Fox went, no, we kind of got burned on Alien Autopsy. Bob Keviott made money coming and going. He made money saying it was real and then made money saying it was fake. So so selling it to you and then not selling it to you was Bob Keviott's trick. So he got turned down by Fox. So he's walking around, and he's on Cahuenga and Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood, and he picks up a Variety magazine and opens it up. And there is advertisements for a funny golf video by Tim Conway called, Dorf Teaches You Golf. And it was being put out by Rocket Video. So he calls Rocket Video. He gets Tom Coleman's secretary on the phone. And he says, this is what I have. So Tom takes the call and thinks it's kind of interesting. But my friend Jeff Broadstreet was working at the company. And Ron calls him in and says, hey, didn't you go out to Area 51 with your crazy friend, Sean David Morton, and go see UFOs flying around? He said, yeah. He goes, here we go. You want to call this guy back? Take it. And he said, okay. So Jeff, who was the progenitor of this, basically calls Victor, sets up an interview, and that's how the whole thing with Rocket Video began and how this was all released. So the first person that Jeff called was me, to take a look at this. Now, the alien interview, you're going to see it again because there are deals being done. There's a producer by the name of John Stewart, who's a friend of mine. And it's been 25 years, and no one has debunked this video. The video would have taken probably $200,000 to $300,000 to fake. No one's come forward to fake it. No one has claimed it's bogus. It's held up for 25 years. We took it to Baker, to Chris Criswell, to all the basically big makeup guys and big special effects guys in Hollywood. And they said, well, we think it's fake. We could fake it. We can fake it. And we're like, how much? And they said, at least $250,000, $350,000. I'm like, who's going to spend that on something that's fake? And they said, well, if you introduced me to the guy, I would hire him right away. Because there's Department of Naval Intelligence. The biggest thing is we had an emergency room doctor who took a look at the heart monitor and every time the being moves or breathes or gasps or whatever, it's reflected on that heart monitor. It's also interesting too because the alien itself does not have a human style heart that goes lub-dub, but has a single heart lung organ, which was being inundated by parasites, exactly like the way the aliens died in War of the Worlds. And there were two aliens originally that were Project Pounce in a saucer in the Kalahari Desert, and we had constructed level 5 at Area 51. Actually, at an area called it's Lake area. Because now the only thing that's really functioning is S2, S4, S3. Most of Area 51, by the way, is just for ramjets, scramjets, stealth. I mean, it's top secret tech, but it was not. Area 51 was only interesting between 87 when they expanded the borders by 89,000 acres, and when I found the place in 91, sorry. And found a hilltop that looked down to the base, which forced them to eventually move everything. And eventually in 93, they moved everything out. And stopped the testing on Wednesdays, which is when they used to do it, and moved everything to Area 6413, which is the Dugway Proving Grounds out in Utah. Now they have a huge state-of-the-art underground facility underneath Kings Peak in underneath the Uinta National Forest in Utah. So the reason you're seeing it now is because Victor has died. He died in, I think, 2018. and swearing to his grave that it's real, his true name to us, which is going to, and in the new documentary that's coming out, we think with Jon Stewart being behind a lot of this, and that was my involvement in it. Really, they brought me in as an expert on the video. I turned them on to guys like Bob Dean and other experts in the field to take a look at this, military guys, and that's what became. We had Stephen Williams, who was the Black Mr. X from X-Files, and whereas I think Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek, he was the narrator for the Alien Autopsy, and so it's cool. I got to I got to put some of my Star Trek people in it, and so that was my involvement. And I'm very proud of Jeff Broadstreet and what he did, and he went out with us. He was really dedicated. Went out with us on the Wednesday nights to go see for himself. So I was proud of everybody involved in the project. I went on TV. I was on Roseanne Barr. I was on the news. I was on Channel 7, Channel 5, basically, and they made fun of me, and girls came out, were dancing with like a rubber alien, and I just took it with with giggles and grins and giggles. So that's the name of that too. There we go.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I actually have interviewed Jon Stewart a couple of times, and we've gone over his research on the Victor Alien interview. But I wanted your opinion on it because it is still controversial. But you know about Victor, the actual leaker, and you think he's credible that he did have access to the S4 facility at Area 51 and somehow was able to smuggle this out.
It's real. It's the whole thing's real. And here's your challenge. It's a being in a room behind a sheet of glass. It's not with UFO videos. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can do parallax photography. You can do computer analysis. You can get an idea that this thing exists in space. With this, there's a being in a room behind a plate of glass. You don't know. And but you take it to the best special effects experts who specialize in this stuff. As a matter of fact, I even took it to I think they were shooting Independence Day at the time, and Dean Devlin is a friend of mine. Matter of fact, I took Dean Devlin up to the top of the hill looking down on Area 51, and Dean said, so you're telling me that if there's an invasion from space, that this would be the place that we were our last line of defense, where we would be developing a technology to fight it off? And I said, yeah, and that's where the idea for Independence Day came from. So, in fact, Dean called me with the Independence Day because he had the complete support of the United States military, and the military wrote him a letter that said, if you mention Area 51 in your movie, we're going to pull all our support. And I said, you got to read this. And I think he went to Comic-Con, or he went to one of the conventions and actually read the letter from the military, which is why the whole thing got shot in Utah, because the Mormons are all about this stuff. I mean, they've been, it's like the Scientologists have been making the Mormons look sane since 1953. And, they have in essence kind of an outer space religion. So it's, so we got the complete support of the Utah National Guard, which is why it was all shot up at the Salt Flats up in Salt Lake.
Okay. Well, one of the things that Jon Stewart did was that he actually traveled to Washington, D.C., and he handed over the results of his investigation into the Victor Alien video to Congressman Tim Burchett, who actually is part of an investigation into the whole UFO UAP phenomenon, and he has promised that he would look into the alien videos. So
useless.
Yeah. So what do you think of that? I mean, what do you think of Congress's attempts to get to the bottom of this UFO UAP issue?
Completely useless. And the fact that they changed it, they're the ones that created the laughter curtain and the ridicule behind the word UFO. So now they're calling UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Screw off. You've got Luis Alessandro. I'm sure he's a great guy, and I'm not dissing anybody in the field, but what my Sands of Time books say, and by the way, we got a big special running on Amazon. If you want to get involved in the adventure, once again, this is book one. Let me put it over here. This is book one of Sands of Time. We've got it on sale right now for the cost of printing, which is $25 if you want to get involved in the adventure. This is book one here. You can look it up either Amazon.com or Strange Universe Radio. .com. I'd prefer you buy it from us, obviously, because then Jeff Bezos, Dr. Evil, doesn't get a big cut out of it. But we've got a big Amazon campaign right now. And
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a great series. I have read the first couple of volumes of Sands of Time, and yeah, very entertaining. And I think you did a great job in weaving in facts in what appears to be a kind of a fictionalized narrative. So very interesting
I
book
I
series.
adventurized, if you will, the diaries as opposed to just printing something dull. Did this today, ate breakfast today. I put in, I made it so it's readable. And my goal always has been to write in order to turn things into TV series or screenplays to be able to reach the largest group of people. All the investigations into UAPs and whatever else, the measly $22 million out of a $750 billion yearly budget for the Pentagon, it's they don't want the right hand to know what the left hand is doing. So the secret space program and the base on the moon and the Farpoint stations that we have, the other side of Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, the fact that, two alien races have shown up, the Sumerians, or the Illagim as they're called, from ancient Babylon, Rome, the Nazis, and the Alpha Draconians, who are our gods, if you will, who are going to come back and end us. We managed to kick him in the teeth. I mean, we kicked him in the teeth, we fought him off, and this is the true history of Earth. So, on the one hand, and let me just tell you about this. When they did the original investigation in Area 51, which was when the 5-1 guys just took 89,000 acres of public land, and Harry Reid had congressional investigations about that, they got the commandant of Nellis in front of a congressional committee. And they said, what gives you the right to just confiscate 89,000 acres of a sovereign state? And he said, well, we answer to a higher authority than you. And Harry Reid got all erect on him and said, well, who's higher than the United States Congress? And the commandant said, well, we'd be happy to answer that for you behind closed doors. Be happy to give you a tour, Congressman. And then he said, not only that, but he said, well, what goes on there? And the commandant said, how the hell should I know? I don't know. I don't have the clearance to go there. The president of the United States has a Q8 clearance. In order to set foot on Area 51 or any S4, S2, whatever, you have to have at least a Q16 clearance, which is the lowest clearance that they gave Bob Lazar when Lazar went. And the only reason Lazar got the job is because they tried to crack open one of these alien engines and it exploded. And so they wrote it off as an unscheduled atomic test. And so they had 5 vacancies they needed to fill in a hurry, not with the best scientists, but with people that they could later, cow or intimidate or make fun of or whatever. So they weren't the best guys in any way. And Lazar got the job just because he called Edward Teller on the phone. He'd met him at Los Alamos and said, what do you know about Area 51? And Edward Teller said, I'll see what I can do. And Bob got a call, which led to him actually working at 5-1. By the way, he only worked there 16 days between December and May of, I think, 88, 89. And then my documentary crew with Joe Randazzo providing the funding, we interviewed him in January of 90, and in which he told us a completely different story than the story that he tells in his book. And then I got out there in 91 with a friend of mine who worked for the LA Times, and we got our car, and we got irradiated and got our car swooped by a UFO, which put it actually on the front page, left column of the LA Times, which is what turned it into a national and international story, because everybody knew about it at the time. It was, George Knapp and Lazar were sort of local phenomenons, but it was me that turned it into a big international thing, which of course then led to Linda Moulton Howe and I doing sightings. And I produced some 20-minute piece for the 2-hour sightings, highest rated show on Fox ever. And I went to go work for sightings. And they said, sorry, Sean, we want to hire people that don't know anything. The exact words of executive producer Paul Hall. Sightings lasted 13 episodes because the 5 production companies working on sightings wanted them to order 24 episodes. And Fox was only willing, because of legal snafus, to order 13. And the sightings people said, well, we'll go somewhere else. And Fox said, thanks, see you. But what that led to the next day was a TV producer comes in and says, hey, how about a fictional show about a believer and a skeptic, a couple of FBI agents that investigate the same thing that you've proven on Fox is so popular. And they said, okay. And that producer was Chris Carter, which of course then led to X-Files. And interestingly enough, the first pilot of X-Files was about some kids that find a hilltop that looked down on Area 51, which was my story, which is what started X-Files. And I got to be pretty good friends with and have lunch with Chris Carter a bunch of times. And it became in my greatest show. There you
go. Okay, I just wanted to kind of back up to something you said, which is very important. That the power of those running the projects at Area 51,
Correct.
S4 exceeds that of the U.S. Congress. Now, people listening to this, they might be very skeptical. How could that possibly be the case? But there is an incident that another whistleblower came forward at the citizens' hearing on disclosure that was about 2013. Steve Bassett organized, and this whistleblower said that he was an Army cryptographer, and in 1958 he was working for the CIA on the UFO projects, and he said that President Eisenhower had to threaten the Majestic 12 group running Area 51 with the First Army that was stationed in Colorado, that they would come in and take over Area 51 because it had become a rogue entity. And so Majestic 12 backed down because Eisenhower was revered by the military. He was a former still was a five-star general, even though he was president. So the military would have backed him to the hilt. But when the same thing happened under Kennedy, Kennedy didn't have the power or the backing of the military, so the Majestic 12 group just got rid of him. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, Kennedy. Well, Kennedy spilled the beans, and he was executed by the group. When I talk about it in the books, actually, because the group was like, no, Kennedy, if you're going to open your big mouth, the question is not who killed Kennedy, it's who didn't kill Kennedy. He pissed off the mob. He pissed off the military-industrial complex. He pissed off, NASA. NASA is nothing, but Area 51 is the dark side of the moon. It's a completely separate entity. As a matter of fact, there were a bunch of scientists who were suing the people at Area 51 because they had inhaled a bunch of fumes from them open pits worth of the material that was going into the stealth bombers. And so Clinton, I believe it was 97, Clinton signed an executive order that doesn't exist. That was one of the reasons why they wouldn't even admit the place existed, so you couldn't sue them. So it had nothing to do with the military-industrial complex. And by the way, the people at Area 51 had no access to Papoose Lake. Papoose Lake was a whole different thing. It was 30 miles away. You had to take a special bus to get there. So, and Papoose Lake had 5 levels. There were 9 hangars built into the side of a mountain. Level 5 was the ambassadorial suites, where you just saw that video taken of the alien, and so we had biocontainment places, once again to protect the aliens, not so much us, to feed them, to house them, to do whatever. They didn't have any teeth, so we had to come up with this special spirulina algae to be able to feed them. It was tough. And by the way, they still have a Nightmare Hall area where they have a series of samples of the tall blondes, of the Pleiadians, of the Greys, of the reptilians, whatever, in these tubes of bluish liquid, which is like formaldehyde, if you will, with these silver bands on them that they keep a museum of these different species there. So, 5-1, again, if you talk to guys who worked on these projects, I asked an engineer once, a Tier W engineer, why does a stealth bomber cost $1.8 billion? He laughed and said, it doesn't. He says it costs a few $100 million. He says, but what those things are is flying bank accounts. He said, toilet seats and hammers don't really cost $2,500. And I said, what is it you do? And he smiled and said, I work on washing machines on the moon, which I thought was a kind of a funny response. But, that's the kind of thing where there was a complete separation between, and by the way, the reason they were flying the ships on Wednesday nights between 6 and 9, and then Thursday mornings, they would come in about 4:50 a.m. And was because, and they were flying them our side of Bald Mountain over the public Tickaboo Valley and Highway 375, which they later named because of us, the extraterrestrial highway. Because if you flew too high, and remember, they have a military reservation 3 times the size of Switzerland, and they own 89% of the state of Nevada. They own 90% of the state of Utah. Matter of fact, the federal government owns close to 90% of all of the land west of the Mississippi, and which is all under their care, and is run by the BLM thugs, Bureau of Land Management guys. So why were they testing over our head? Why were we being able to film these guys? I mean, we could take photos of this stuff. Meanwhile, we're being smeared by Popular Science and Popular Mechanics magazine, by guys like Stuart Brown, where I'm sending them photos of the UFOs and writing letters to these people saying, you don't know what you're talking about. I dare you to run this photo. They wouldn't run it. Even with LA Times, when we were first out there was a ship that was flying 50 feet off the ground all around. And I asked the LA Times photographer to take a picture of it. He said, I can't. I have a portrait camera that's got a range of 12 feet. I couldn't take a picture of it. I wanted to. Then when we were out with sightings with Linda, there's a ship that came up and was dancing around over the horizon. And I told these guys to turn the cameras around, and they wouldn't. They literally just put their arms like this. And I said, who got to you guys? I said, ain't worth our jobs, man. Because they were all instructed to shoot people watching UFOs. So instead of getting a UFO zipping all around for sightings, you got me pointing and going, holy shit, look at that. And, and I was the commercial for them. And because, again, Area 51 is the dark side of the moon. It's completely separate from the military-industrial complex. Therefore, the $22 million and the UAPs and the Congress and whatever else, all they are trying to do really is find out what the other side of the black world secret government is doing, which is what I reveal in my Sands of Time books. It's all there. This is exopolitics. And let me talk about that for a second. The wonderful name of your show, Exopolitics, and the reason my Sands of Time books are all about the exopolitics, is what people don't realize is that we are in a contested area of space. And the contested area of space is between 2 great empires. One empire is the Alpha Draconians, who are reptilian saurians, who evolved the reptilian life forms who still live on this planet but live underground, and they were evolving with the dinosaurs. That was the reptilian protocol, if you will, versus humanoids or mammals on the surface that have been developed by the Pleiadians, that have been developed by the Aldebaranians, also called the Iligium, being interfered with also with ultra terrestrials or interdimensional beings as well. And we're in between those 2 great empires, really. And so the battle that's coming, I mean, if you read Revelation, the last book of the Bible describes a war between the hosts of heaven, led by Archangel Michael, and the Great Red Dragon, which is Alpha Draconis. And that the dragon is actually sort of takes a bite out of Michael, and Michael manages to cast it to the earth and then put up a shield around Earth. And then, we're on our own. Well, we've managed to subvert the reason nothing works as far as prophecy. Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, Gordon Michael Scallion, all of these projections of the future basically stopped working in 2005. And the reason they stopped working, I had the Prophecy Research Institute where I was studying all this, and I just gave up after 2005 because there was nothing that was being projected anymore. Excuse me a second. And because of this, it was, and so now we're literally in a blue sky future where we, as our brains are being merged together, the left and the right side, since 2012, are in a 13-year period between 2025, December 21st of 2025, which the Meier called the Night of the Jaguar, in which the quantum side of our brain is actually now, the feminine side, is now interacting with the logical masculine side together, where we're launching into a, whatever he calls 5D, or a kind of an interdimensional reality. So, that's what's going on.
All right. Well, quite a lot there. One of the questions I had about this whole S4 facility and its centrality to the way in which the covert world is managed when it comes to UFOs, extraterrestrial life, is that one of the former operatives for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, Richard Doty. I'm sure you know of that name very well. He says,
Yes,
he claims that there's actually an S2 facility and an S4
Yes.
facility that are connected at Papoose Lake. He says the S4 facility is more like a museum where they hold things, but the actual research and production of the alien reverse engineered craft, the TR-3Bs, they're all kind of like operated and manufactured at the S2 facility. So do you know anything about that?
Yeah, no, it's my books are all about it. And so yes, S4, which basically stands for, it should be SA4 because it stands for staging area. Papoose Lake is on S4, and Bob Lazar told us that back in 1990. And then you've got S2, you've got Area 13, which is where they store a bunch of nuclear waste and they do actually nuclear tests. But that's exactly correct. And so very little goes on at 5-1, the actual 5-1 facility. There you've got ramjets, scramjets, stealth fighters, plutonium pellet drives. You've got big stuff that comes in from space. This is where the big shuttles come in. I mean, I saw with my own eyes a 1,600 foot from tip to tail blunt nose shuttle that came in from space that was creating what they called skyquakes. It was on the news, by the way. In Southern California, is creating 3.5 earthquakes on the ground when this thing came in. Paul Meier on the news said it was 2 craft when it wasn't. It was one big ship. And myself and my friend John Hadley, who was later murdered, we saw this thing. I mean, it's remarkable I'm not dead. They haven't just gone and, probably I'm somehow protected. For writing these books, they still decided to put me in prison anyway. And long story. But, for just completely trumped up charges. But I'm out and I'm talking about it now. And my goal is by my birthday on October 1st is to have the entire 9-book series done. We just released.
Before we go to the books, we will discuss the books. I just wanted to finish the questions I had about these alien videos, because another one that has been around for some time, and I'm sure you know about it, is the Skinny Bob video. So I just wanted to play that, and while it's playing, tell us what you know about the Skinny Bob video.
I don't know anything about it really, but it's cool. So let's take a look.
Yeah, I think this came out around 1997, so around the same time of the Victor Alien video. And this is supposedly of an alien. Some people describe it not as a grey, but as they call it an emertha, which is a friendly group of extraterrestrials. So you don't know anything about that particular one?
Nothing. Had nothing to do with it. Don't know about it. Very interesting.
Okay. All right. Well,
could be real or not, but again, I was involved with the alien autopsy and the alien interview about bringing those to the public. And but no, as far as everything else goes, I don't know anything about it. But very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was very interesting. I know John Stewart thinks it's genuine, and I've had a skilled remote viewer. Do you know John Vivanco? He actually did a remote viewing of that particular video, the Skinny Bob, and his remote viewing results were that it was real. So so what do you think of John Vivanco and his remote viewing skills?
I'm sure he's great. I have no opinions. I mean, other remote viewers in the field, awesome. I mean, just look at their track record as to what they've done, what they can do, and I would put any of the remote viewers that I've trained up against anybody, because the problem is that no other remote viewer that I know of, like myself, has been able to predict stock market, financial markets, earthquakes, phenomenon, train other people, because I had a series of seminars called the Spiritual Remote Viewing, SRV. And again, I learned it at the very beginning at Stanford from Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann. And then some years later, I lived with and was romantically involved with Dr. Elizabeth Targ. And we were using remote viewing to predict roulette wheels, because you figure anything you're good at, you should probably get paid for. And we managed to pay for her at school and, become a psychiatrist and she tragically died, I think, because she didn't put the proper protocols in place to protect herself when she was doing experiments with doing prayer experiments with people with brain tumors, and then she died of a brain tumor. And I warned her that it was going to happen. And she was 48 years old and just got married, and it just Elizabeth's end was tragic because she was messing around with stuff. She really, from a scientific standpoint, that she did not take the spiritual precautions that she needed to prevent her death. So yeah, remote viewing is great, but it's better to find existing targets rather than being able to predict future outcomes. And there's a specific way you win at gambling. Matter of fact, I think my next book, once I'm done with Sands of Time, is going to be The Psychic Gambler's Guide, and how you can use remote viewing and psychic powers to win money at. I mean, nobody else has managed to turn, using remote viewing techniques, has managed to turn $350,000 into almost $7 million in the Forex market, until I had literally had the trader decide he was going to do the exact opposite of everything I told him to do, and went off the reservation and said I was crazy, and then lost everybody's money. But, which I had nothing to do with. He just went rogue and went off the reservation and just really screwed us.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Well, clearly there was something very suspicious happening with that whole situation. But I wanted to now turn to your book series, Sands of Time, and in there you talk about this figure, this hero, action hero, Ted Humphries, Dr. Ted Humphries, who kind of like is able to steer this path between humanity being subjugated by this kind of draconian reptilian group and finding freedom. So you want to talk about Ted Humphries, the plot as it unfolds in the Sands of Time series, and whether that is all fact or whether it's just creative fiction.
Oh, it's all fact. I mean, it's like, yes, I've creatively revolved I guess you would just say kind of a fictional adventure narrative around his rather dry diaries. And it's important for people to know how I got it. And originally, when I was working for Geraldo Rivera, and this was back in, I think, 91, 92, when no one had seen Area 51 at that time except me, because I found a hilltop that looked down on the base. And then all the Johnny-come-latelys that came after, after I told people about the hilltop that looked down on it, suddenly they become big action adventure heroes, and I was the one that was sleeping in the dirt and getting shot at and getting chased and, whatever else. When I was working for Geraldo, we were dealing, myself, Wendell Stevens, Jim Cox, Jim Delatoso, got approached by a man, Connor Hennessy, who called, and Ghostwalker was a super soldier who was in fact an assassin who had carried out something like 61 confirmed kills. And in between his assassination assignments, they gave him a rather cushy job at Area 51. The food's great. It's kind of a 5-star facility. They do you can eat lobster and crab on Sundays, that sort of thing. And he, for whatever reason, decided to defect from this program. And we still don't know if he was a double agent and a spy and just wanted to know what we wanted to seek out. And he supposedly defected from Delta Force. His story was, and remember, I was working for Geraldo Rivera at the time, and his story was, I have a stack of papers, about 500 pages of papers, that is the proof that will blow the lid off all of this, and I will give them to you. But I want $250,000. Okay, so he goes through Jim Cox, he goes through Wendell Stevens, he goes through Jim Delatoso, and he winds up at my house in Hermosa Beach with a stripper girlfriend of his in tow from Florida. And scares me to death. I mean, I was sleeping literally with a 38 under my pillow every night when this guy was there. I watched him do amazing physical things. I mean, like jump to the top of a lifeguard tower from a standing start, run the 100 in sand in like 9 seconds. It just amazing things. And the best thing I can think of is if people want to understand the Super Soldier program, there is a movie. It stars Jeremy Renner, and it's called The Bourne Legacy. And it's actually done in between the Jason Bourne movies, where they hunt Jeremy Renner as one of the soldiers in this program, and they tell you how they use viruses to hep these guys up in suitcases and what have you. So you see that movie. There's more truth and exposure in that movie than anything else you're going to see. So the long and the short of that story is that I said, I'm willing to risk my life, because he said, if I give you this paperwork, your life is going to change. They could kill you. They could shoot you. You're going to be on the run. And I said, I don't care. I want it out there. So we go to Las Vegas. We run around in a circle, chasing down where he says this is. We have an entire security team that we hire, with Geraldo saying, if we get the paperwork, I'll give you the money. But the money's on the other side of the door where we get the paperwork. And I'm communicating with Bob Kevy this whole time. We wind up with a security team out in front of the Flamingo Hotel at the time, and waiting for this guy. And he disappears, never shows up. And that was it. I mean, I've never heard from him again. Now, I asked Wendell what happened to Ghost Walker. And Wendell said he had heard from him again, and that he believed once again that we were all being kind of pranked, and that he was a double agent, and that now he was in the process of, and that he'd gone back inside, and now he was in the process of basically infiltrating sovereign patriot groups. And his exact words, Wendell's words, was he's trying to convince them to blow something up, and so they could pin it on him. And then, of course, you had the entire black operation with Timothy McVeigh, who was an agent, who is still alive, who was never executed. That whole thing was fake. And, so there was that. Now, Ted Humphrey, as part of these programs, is watching me this entire time. And when I'm on Coast to Coast in front of what Art and I had built that audience into, was 27 million people. Number one late night, number 3 overall behind Rush Limbaugh and Dr. Laura, and releasing all kinds of information. And Ted would call me on the phone and say, hey, what about this? What about that? Look into this, look into the other thing. So the last I hear from him, from Ted Humphrey, is he calls me during Obama's inauguration, because I'd written a newsletter article where I said that Obama could not take the oath of office because he was not a U.S. citizen, and that he could become the corporate president of the United States. There's papers that you sign in the Senate to do this, but he could not take the Article 6 oath because he wasn't a citizen of the United States. Matter of fact, they never, ever gave him the nuclear football because Obama was not a U.S. citizen. Matter of fact, his real name was Barry Soetoro, which is still what it read. Never changed it to Barack Obama. And he called me, and I'd bet him $100 because he said, what you're saying is impossible. And so many of my predictions had been impossible, and yet they happened anyway. And he's laughing on the phone, saying, I can't believe I'm watching this. I think you referred to him as a monkey or something. Screw up the oath exactly like you said. I owe you $100. That's the last I heard from him. So I get a call in March of 2009 from some very scary lawyers in Century City who had done work for the military. And there's this lady lawyer, and I went into the office in Century City because they said it was a probate thing. And they said Ted Humphrey had, quote, moved on. They never said he died. He moved on. Well, what does that mean? Did he die? Was there a funeral? He's moved on. But as part of this probate, he's left you all these diaries. And we want you to sign for him, but we want you to swear and sign a whole series of ironclad NDAs. You will go to prison. We will shoot you in the head if you tell anybody what his real name is or other people that are involved in the program. Now, once again, like Victor, as you just saw, I had no reason to out people in the programs or out people that were with this. But what I found was a series of diaries that consisted of diaries from Ted Sr., from his father, from Ted Humphrey Jr., and another diary that was just kind of tucked in there, which is this book here, which was the diary of Baron Wilhelm Fritz von Ritter-Spottenheim. And thank you very much. Who actually had known my great uncle, who was also a baron, an Austrian, Baron Ulrich von Sultenhammer. And it was his romantic and financial interaction with these 5 women who called themselves the Vril-Damen, and how they were at the heart and the core of the occult essence of the Third Reich. One of them was kind of dating Hitler. They were in the news. They were all over the place. And how they sent out a telegram on March 11th of 1945 that said specifically, no one is staying here. We are all going home. And they managed to rig up a ship that took 7 journeys back and forth to a planet somewhere around Aldebaran, which is a red giant in the eye of Taurus, also known as the Hyades. And they took some 1,700, scientists, researchers, what have you, with them to Aldebaran. And I didn't really know what to do with the diary. So in between, book 5, book 6, and book 5 and book 7, I inserted the Real Diamond Diaries because it introduces Fritz, Baron Spottenheim, Ritter Spottenheim, and introduces Sigrund, who is the brains behind the whole thing, who claims to have, somehow lived or been conscious for thousands of years and been part of the original Babylon Aldebaran thing. Because the Aldebaran or the Iligium have been responsible for setting up Babylon, have been responsible for setting up Rome, and had been responsible for trying to set up another 1,000-year Reich, which was the Nazis, which they failed to do. And again, as you find out in the books, I mean, we've been attacked, or we've had armadas on their way to destroy Earth and fulfill, I guess you would say, all the bad parts of the Testament by the by the Iligium, the Aldebaranians, and Draco, and Alpha Draconians. And which is why our future is completely, our entire timeline has been changed. And why we're looking at more of a kind of a blue sky future where none of the ancient prophecies really come to pass. So that's the series. And as I said, my 15-year journey with this will finally be over when I finally publish books 8 and 9, which is part 1 and 2 of the Draco Wars. And of course now, part Act 3 or book 7 of the Sumerian Wars is out now. As a matter of fact, it dropped on 7/7/2023, and it's up on Amazon, Amazon.com. The Sumerian War, and it's also up on our website. So Dr. Evil Jeff Bezos doesn't get a big chunk of the money, which is StrangeUniverseRadio.com. StrangeUniverseRadio.com. So those are the books, and they've been heralded. They've got 5 stars on Amazon. They've got like a 98% rating. Everybody that buys these books loves them. Because it takes you into a universe, Michael, of true technology. I mean, the real history of mankind is going to be written by these books. Is going to be written by the technology that exists in this other world, this other time frame, if you will, the black world technology, and what our real human achievements are. Not us currently, wallowing in the mud and dirt of CNN and Fox politics of Biden versus Trump. And we'll see how it works out.
Okay, so just to kind of clarify, then, so up until 2009, which is the last time you spoke with Ted Humphries, you have all of his diaries about these events, and you've put them in this kind of fictionalized form in the book series, and so the information in in books 7, 8, and 9, that's all based on what Ted Humphrey had learned up until 2009 or earlier.
It's all exopolitics. It's the exopolitics of Earth. Everything that you talk about, everything the show is about, is the true exopolitics of the great houses, if you will, that rule different parts of the galaxy, mostly through totalitarian power and slavery, that wanted to extend that here to Earth. And the true exopolitics is what's going on behind the scenes, and what you're seeing now with Stephen Greer and Luis Alessandro and all these other people they're just trying to pull back the tent on what this black world technology has been doing and what they know. I mean, look, once you crack gravity, once you understand what gravity is, not what it does, but what it is, and the formula for this is, I mean, I put it all through the books. I took out a patent and a copyright on it because it's the formula for the unified field theory, which is the last thing Einstein saw. He wrote down the theory and then fell over dead in his office at Princeton in New Jersey. And through this, once you crack gravity, now you crack time. Now you crack space. Now you're able to teleport anywhere in the universe, not just the galaxy, but the universe, virtually instantaneously. You take time from traveling from place to place. The biggest thing we've done with it, and I've been trying to get this to Elon Musk, or even if you doubt the veracity of the books, because I'm I'm not smart enough to figure this out. Show the unified field theory in all of its various mathematical expressions, like, Langdarian formula, to Michikaku or to, one of the physicists out there, and tell me I'm full of crap. So, because I don't get it. But what they use now is they have these they're not as nice as this one, maybe the Rolex, but they have these grabophones, which are like these Dick Tracy wristwatches, where they can communicate. You can't eavesdrop on it. You can't wiretap it, anything, but you can use these watches to communicate with anyone, anywhere in the universe. And it was originally figured out by Wilhelm Mueller, I think is who it was, who noticed the effect of instantaneous communication, but couldn't really put his finger on it. Said, I don't know how it works, but this is how it works. And it was an experiment he did between St. Petersburg, Russia, and Munich at the time, where he could communicate instantaneously between those 2 points.
Well, just on that issue, because I think it's a very kind of pertinent point, is that if you look at some of the Sumerian texts, the cuneiform texts, they show pictures of Enki, and they show him with a wristwatch, exactly like what you described. So that we're talking about, at least 6,000 years ago, that those kinds of watches that enable instantaneous communication, like a Dick Tracy, that was actually being used by the Anunnaki gods, if you like, or their leaders.
Right. Exactly. So again, if I get a hold of Elon Musk and grab his attention for a couple hours or so, and I'm a big fan, I'm a big admirer, but he could use all this. And of course, now he's got 10,000 satellites in space, and they're activating 5G, and the 5G is activating graphene oxide. There's a whole other control mechanism that's being put in place, and unfortunately, you have all these James Bond villains out there who I can't mention because, you might get kicked off YouTube. But, and then they kill off James Bond. I'm wondering, where the hell's James Bond to go after these Spectre villains that are planning to execute not just millions, but billions of people? And unfortunately, we're standing on the edge of an abyss. Because if you understand the prophecies of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and let me point out that if you look at the pyramid, the satanic pyramid that's on the back of the dollar bill, which was a symbol for the United States that was given directly to Thomas Jefferson by Adam Weishaupt, who was actually good friends with Jefferson, you'll notice that pyramid has 13 levels. It has a ribbon that has 2 serpent's tongues on either side, and it's got the all-seeing eye of Satan, of the Illuminati, at the top of that pyramid, as opposed to the Great Pyramid of Giza, which which I've studied since I was 15 years old. We did a $350,000 documentary on it, where I got to spend 2 weeks at night inside the Great Pyramid shooting this documentary. That it is a gigantic prophecy in stone that describes the spiritual unfoldment of man over a 7,000-year period, or 7 days. And we're at the beginning of the 6th day right now, which is a Friday, if you will, and cleansing the temple, and everybody has to be cleared out of the theater before they are allowed to reincarnate. And we're in that period now. Matter of fact, the pyramid describes it as the Great Exodus, and that it happens between February 21st of 1999 and the return of the Messiah. And by the way, it predicts Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu as being the first messiahs in 600 BC. Before that, it exactly predicts. After that, it exactly predicts the birth of Christ, the location of the the birth of Christ, when Christ would die, which is April 1st of 33 AD, and how that great sacrifice then leads to erasing the chains of karma, unleashing Dharma, freeing the human race for 2,000 years, so that we can learn and grow. But then beginning in 1900, at the beginning of the 20th century, we have to come back. We have to return. And we're all returning so that we can all be here for the final exam at the very end, which takes place, once again, between now and 2039 AD, specifically October 31st, or Halloween. because Halloween or All Saints Day represents the return of the spirits of the dead. And at that point, some kind of messiah takes over a world government or a theocracy of some kind, and things get pretty good after that. Now we really unleash the technology I've been talking about in these books, which is why everybody needs to read them. You've had glimpses of this with books by like Peter Moon and Al Bielek, who I supported for the months before he died. I'm going to do a script about that, about the USS Eldridge, about his experiences. But that's the name of that tune. And again, my entire life is my vow to constantly work towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings, which is, of course, animals and human beings. That's why I lived in a monastery in Nepal. That's why I studied with the Dalai Lama. That's why I got my degrees in theology, because, my mother wanted me to be a fundamentalist, born-again preacher guy. And I realized that you have 100 pounds of junk and a 5-pound bag. You've either got to throw all the 195 pounds of the junk away, or you need to get a bigger bag. And so when I lived in Egypt when I was a kid, I realized that not all these people, these Muslim guys, were going to hell, and I needed to get a bigger bag, which is, of course, what changed my philosophy and into another book I'm going to write that I'm going to call The Christian Buddhist, because it's all about how Buddhism was absolutely correct with all the chains and the Dharma and the Karma and the Sangha and whatever else up until the sacrifice and the crucifixion of Christ, or Emmanuel ben Joseph, as he was called. And now us being here, but again, everybody incarnating, so they have to check out. So it's weird. You have all these villains who are now coming, who want to kill us, who want to either use mosquitoes or genetically engineered viruses, and they keep failing, killing us, because the power of our consciousness now that we have, again, there's 6 main chakras on the planet. There's Lhasa, Tibet. There's Cairo, Egypt, which is the Great Pyramid. There's Stonehenge, which is the solar plexus. There is the heart chakra, which is the solar plexus is Stonehenge. The heart chakra is Machu Picchu. The 6th chakra of the throat is downtown Los Angeles at the gazebo on Elvira Street. And the 6th chakra is Osaka, Japan. It's actually a city outside of Osaka called Tenri City. But the 7th chakra, and I've been saying this forever since before we had it, is the internet, is everything that you're doing, Michael, right now. It's important. Everybody connecting into this and bypassing the controlled villainy and the sickness of the mainstream media, and understanding that so many in the Democratic Party, that it's become the political party of devil worshippers and Satanists and child molesters. And when Pluto finally moves into Aquarius, which will be November between the 19th and the 21st of 2024, if Trump gets in at that time, because Trump's a Gemini, and it trines his chart astrologically, then we are looking at a golden age. Now, I just wish that he and DeSantis had stopped fighting, so that DeSantis could come on and maybe as vice president or something. Trump is there for 4 years. DeSantis is there for maybe another 8 years. And, things might change. If not, and if I think what's going to happen, I'm not going to mention a lot of this, but if I think what's going to happen with the election, where everything gets split, and Lord Palpatine, who's behind all this, and they managed to grease in another Democrat then through complete fraud, I think that's what then leads to the Civil War, and I think it starts leading to the secession of states and counties, and people saying, "Screw you! I'm just not going to do what you say." And I think the collapse of the federal government.
Yeah, well, let's hope that it doesn't come to that.
No, let's hope it does come to that, because that's the revolution. That's we need the Sons of Liberty now. I'm sorry, but we need to start stepping up these people.
Well, I'm hoping that it's all done peacefully rather than secession and civil war, which is really I think there have been a lot of people that have tried to avoid that, and I think it would be great if we have a smooth transition for the 2024 election.
I'm going to get you one of these cups, Michael. See the cup? I don't know if you can see this or not. See that? Thanos was right. If you ever saw the Avengers movie,
Thanos was right. Okay, very good. Well, Sean, I think it's we should bring this to a close, but I want to maybe give you an opportunity here to I know you've been going through some serious health issues, and I really wish you the very best in terms of what lies ahead. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe address that for people, because I mean you're suffering some serious stuff, and if you want to say anything about that, because I know you've got a lot of people that support you or want to support you, and how to do that.
Well, I need your prayers now more than ever. I'm doing this before tomorrow. I go in for a major surgical procedure. They're going down my throat, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal squamous cell throat cancer on January 5th of 2021. I was homeless. I was penniless. My credit had been destroyed by people out here who took my identity, got credit cards, stole everything I had in my house, stole my car, stole my cats. Real criminal types. And I managed to land on my feet thanks to wonderful audience of the internet. I got to thank Carrie Cassidy. I got to thank you. All the other people out there. Now I had a tumor. I keep this. It's a lapis egg, but this was the size of the tumor that was hanging out of my neck. I mean, literally, it was heck. And I received no medical care for 16 months, none. And I kept going to doctors, said nothing we can do for you. You're going to die. The tumor is wrapped around your jugular and your carotid arteries, and so we can't operate on it. So what I did is that I used a series of like hillbilly remedies. I used something called Amazonian black salve, which is amazing stuff, and it's only supposed to be used for squamous cell cancers like warts and melanomas and skin tags. And I smeared this thing on a tumor this size. Sorry, tumor. Let's put it in front of that. Tumor this size. And I put a belt between my teeth and took a bunch of painkillers and burned it off. I burned the tumor off. Doctors were amazed. They said, "Did you have an operation?" I said, "No, you wouldn't operate on it." But I still had interior stuff. Val Kilmer and I have been friends for about 30 years. And matter of fact, I think I set him up with his girlfriend. And I called him because he had the same thing I had. And he said, "Look, Sean, I'm a Christian Scientist. I've done science of mind. I've done hands-on healing. I did all the voodoo hoobajoo. This is the one cancer that these Western doctor idiots," he called them something worse, "can actually maybe fix. Just let them do what they do." So I submitted myself to like 37 radiation treatments, which gamma radiation, which turned me into the Hulk for a while. And then chemotherapy, which allows you to vomit uncontrollably at completely unexpected times, mostly when you're in somebody's nice car. So through that, I was declared cancer-free, but a year ago in August, I started bleeding out of my mouth, and just gouts of blood for 2 days. My wife took me to the emergency room, and without consent, without my knowledge, without even consenting my wife, this very large, obnoxious Korean doctor, Dr. Sun, came in and performed literally knocked me out and performed a tracheotomy on me, claiming that it was to save my life, which is not true. They were going to use silver nitrate sticks to staunch the bleeding. So most of the damage that's been done, because he screwed up my esophagus, and I think what they did was they split the airway and the stomach pathway with this botched tracheotomy. It sort of sucked because, well, really sucked because I couldn't speak for a period of time. And I found out that women and cats are the same. With a dog, you point at something, and the dog will get what you're pointing at and usually go fetch it for you. With a woman and a cat, like my wife, because she sucked at charades, I could point at something, and the cat will just stare at your finger and usually just rub your finger and expect you to, rub them with their finger. And so I couldn't talk at all because I had a tube in my throat. And but what I did, not being able to speak, is I started writing. And so in translating all of this stuff, and by the way, we're almost there to actually get Sands of Time translated into French. And I just struck a deal with a guy to translate it into German. And then next, it's going to be translated into Spanish. And it'll be up on Kindle in all those various languages. So I think what's going on is that I think it's damage and an infection and inflammation from the botched tracheotomy. And they think that it might be that with this tracheotomy, it may have spread the cancer into my lungs. If there is cancer in my lungs, then I'm done. And I'll be dead actually pretty soon. But my goal being that by my birthday on October 1st of this year, that I will be done with all 9 books, that they will be out, that they will be published, and that thank God that people will buy them and realize the legacy that they represent, that it's part of our history, that it's the true history of mankind. And again, Sands of Time is where you begin the adventure. Please go on Amazon.com, strangeuniverseradio.com. And thanks to you, Michael, and thanks to, again, this is all exopolitics. And it's the exopolitics of what's really going on behind the scenes. The clown show that's going on now on Fox News and CNN and whatever else is exactly that. It's a clown show. The real stuff is going on behind the scenes that affects no one in the black ops world. The real thing is again, we don't know what's going on at Area 51, and neither does the government or the military. But these books tell you from a guy who's at the center of the web. And the great thing about these books is, well, if you're just now getting into conspiracy theories, you get entangled in a web of so many different things, no matter where you go, whether or not it's, JFK or, vaxes or the moon program or whatever else. What this does is it tells you the story from the guy at the center of the web, who has developed all this stuff from his point of view. So it gives you a personal point of view, and you unravel his journey as we learn to conquer, both time and space, and talk about time travel and how we've been freed, and how we broke the Isomer Protocol propaganda. We've kicked the Aldebaranians in the teeth, who were teaming up with the Nazis. The Greys beat the Draconians, who were responsible for basically devolving us, which goes back to the Anunnaki, goes back to the Maya, goes back to everything else. But it includes everything. So you want to know everything about Dulce, about Area 51, about the USS Elders, Philadelphia experiment, the moon program, moon bases, whatever. It's all there, and it's all worked into the gestalt, the zeitgeist, if you will, of a cogent personal story of a guy who does care and says, at some point, I'm going to be able to release this to the public, but after I've moved on. And this is his last will and testament, his dying wish or moving on. And someday he might return. He might come back and show up at my house and say, "Hey, Sean, how you doing? Good job with those books." But he saw that I was willing to risk my life, and as it is, they trumped up the dumbest charges against me, for crimes that had no victims, had no monetary loss to anyone. It beats them putting a bullet in my head or my being suicided, like my friends Danny Casolaro, John Hadley, Jim Keith. Everybody else in this field is dead, by the way, except me. And which, I may not be long for this earth, but and I thank you, people like Kerry Cassidy, people like Michael, Nino Jaco, all the people whose podcasts that I'm on now. I'm sorry I can't do podcasts myself because I just can't speak for that long. But there it is. And I say thank you. And once again, we represent the 7th chakra of Earth, because it's all of us coming together as a single consciousness. And one last thing I want to leave you with. There's mottos of different civilizations. The Romans was Pax Romana, and to thine own self be true. The Greeks was know thyself. The motto of the great American civilization, when they put us to rest and put it on our tombstone, will probably be more is better. If I just had more of something, it'd be better. The motto of the Maya was as above, so below, as within, so without, was the Egyptians. And the motto of the Maya was all is one, life has purpose, God is love. And that means that all of us together are one consciousness and one entity. And life has purpose means that if you woke up today and rolled out of bed and fed the cats and drank the coffee or whatever it is you do, that life's not over, that you've got a purpose, that every day is a good day, all things work together for good, for them that love God, for them that are chosen according to his purpose. And if God really is love, then that means we're all here through acts of love. We all exist because somebody loves somebody. And the Tibetans have an interesting way of looking at this, saying we've lived an average of 80,000 incarnations. And in every single of those, everybody on this planet at one point has been your mother and has loved you unconditionally like your mother. And if God really is love, then that means the primum mobile, the first thought of the universe, is for the love and for the greatest and highest good of the universe. May not seem that way at the time. Matter of fact, cleaning out this planet of billions of people might not see that time. But it's all laid out in a great plan of our evolution through reincarnation and moving upward, the children of light moving up, the children of darkness moving down. and how we get there. And that's all I have to say. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, I want to thank you, Sean, for your dedicated service and your efforts to get the truth out and revealing how this exopolitics genre really is the way to unravel all of this. And of course, your Sands of Time book, I recommend people go get those because it's a great way to inform yourself and give them as a gift to people that need to be, read into this kind of material. And it's a great way to support Sean as he's going through this very difficult transition. So I hope we have many more interviews in the future, Sean. So the very best, and God bless you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.